Right, let's dive into the body's long-term stress response, what's known as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal system, or just the HPA system. Now, if you're doing your A-levels in psychology, you'll know this is a massive part of the stress topic. So we're going to unpack exactly how it works and everything you need to know for your exam. You know that feeling during exam season? You start off all fired up, but after a few weeks, you're just exhausted, maybe a bit grumpy, and you seem to be catching every cold going around. That feeling of being totally burned out, well, it's not just in your head. It's a real biological thing, and it's all driven by this HPA system we're about to get into.
So here's the game plan for this explainer. We'll start with the essential knowledge. That's all your AO1 marks sorted. Then we'll see how it all applies to real life for AO2. After that, we'll get into the really good stuff, the critical evaluation for those crucial AO3 marks, looking at the pros, the cons, and the key research. And then we'll wrap it all up.
Okay, let's get into it. We're starting with the foundations. This is your core AO1 content, just getting our heads around what the HPA system is and how it actually functions. So the first thing you've got to remember is that your body actually has two different stress systems. There's the SAM system, that's your super fast fight or flight response, all powered by adrenaline. But that's not our focus today. We're looking at the other one, the HPA system. Think of this as the slow burn, long haul system for chronic stress, like revising for months. And its star player is a hormone called cortisol. So how does this whole thing work? Well, it's basically a hormonal chain reaction. It all kicks off when your hypothalamus, deep in your brain, senses a long-term stressor. First, it shoots out a hormone called CRH. That CRH then talks to the pituitary gland, telling it to release a second hormone, ACTH. Finally, that ACTH travels all the way down to your adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys, and that triggers the release of our main event, cortisol. Hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal. That's your HPA axis right there. And what's so interesting about cortisol is, even though we call it the stress hormone, its main job is to help you cope. It keeps your energy levels steady, it sharpens your focus, and, this is really important, it shuts down things that aren't essential right now, like your immune system, to save all that precious energy for dealing with the threat. Now, your body is pretty clever. It has a built-in off switch called a negative feedback loop. Think of it like a thermostat. When your cortisol levels get high enough, your brain senses it and tells the system to calm down and stop producing more. But here's the problem. What happens when the stress just doesn't go away? Well, that thermostat can break, and you're left with cortisol pumping through your system constantly, which is where the damage starts. Okay, so that's the theory done. Let's move on and apply this to the real world. This is where we get our AO2 marks. Let's go straight back to that exam stress idea. To begin with, that cortisol boost is actually great. It gives you the focus and drive for those late-night revision sessions. But when that continues for weeks and weeks, that same cortisol starts shutting down your immune system, and that's exactly why you get sick. Even worse, it can start to damage your hippocampus, which is the part of your brain you need for memory. So the crazy thing is, the very system designed to help you cope with the stress of exams ends up damaging the part of your brain you need to pass them. And this quote just hits the nail on the head. Burnout is not about being lazy or not trying hard enough. It is, and I quote, physiological exhaustion. Your body's stress machinery has just been running on overdrive for way too long. And this isn't just about students, of course. It applies to anyone in a high-pressure job, like nurses or teachers. But here's a massive cross-topic link. For your exams, think psychopathology. A dysfunctional HPA system with its constantly high cortisol is heavily linked to depression. This gives you a really powerful biological explanation for how chronic stress can actually lead to a serious mental illness. Okay, time to switch gears to AO3. This is where you get those top-tier marks by critically evaluating the HPA model. So what's good about it? Well, it's got heaps of scientific evidence, and it gives us a really clear biological pathway between feeling stressed and actually getting sick. But, and this is a big but, it is not the full story. The single biggest weakness is that it's purely biological. It completely ignores psychological stuff, like how you think about a stressor. And because of that, it can't explain why you and your friend might react completely differently to the exact same exam. So if you're looking for a killer evaluation point for your essay, here it is. The HPA model is biologically reductionist. It takes this hugely complex human experience of stress and boils it down to just a simple chain of hormones. There's no room in this model for your thoughts, your feelings, or whether you see an upcoming exam as a terrifying threat or an exciting challenge. And we all know that makes a huge difference.
Now, you can't properly evaluate a theory without looking at the research behind it. And for AQA, your best friend for doing this is the GRAVE framework. So let's apply it to a classic study in this area. The key study you'll want to know is Kiecolt-Glaser from 1984. They did something pretty clever, really. They took blood samples from a group of medical students during a relatively relaxed time of year, and then they took another sample from the same students right in the middle of their stressful final exams. So let's run this through GRAVE. G for generalizability? It's limited. This was a very specific group, medical students, so we can't just assume the findings apply to everyone. R for reliability? It's high. Blood tests are an objective, standardized scientific measure, so it's very replicable. A for applicability? Definitely high. This research helps explain why so many of us get ill during exam periods. V for validity? This is its greatest strength. They studied real-life stress, real exams, not some made-up task in a lab, so it has high ecological validity. And finally, E for ethics? Pretty low risk. The stress was naturally occurring, the researchers didn't create it. See? Using this framework gives you a perfectly structured evaluation paragraph every time. So let's pull all of this together. After looking at the theory, the applications, and the evaluation, what's the final verdict on the HPA system?
Well, the most sophisticated way to think about stress isn't to get stuck on just one explanation. It's to zoom out and use what's called the biopsychosocial model. This argues that to truly understand stress, you can't just look at biology, like the HPA system. You have to combine it with our psychology, how we think and cope, and the social factors around us, like the pressure from school or family.
And that really is our main takeaway here. The HPA system is an absolutely essential piece of the puzzle. It's the biological engine of our long-term stress response. But that's exactly what it is. It's one piece of a much larger, much more complex picture. It is essential, but it is only a partial explanation.
So I'll leave you with this final thought to chew on. Is stress something that happens in the body or something that starts in the mind? As we've seen, the real answer is you simply can't separate the two. And really understanding that deep connection is the key to mastering this entire topic.